As a buyer in the crazy Chicagoland real estate market, how do you ensure that you're not overpaying in a bidding war? I'm going to explain that to you in today's video. As a reminder, I'm Mike Thornton. I have a top real estate team here in the western suburbs of Chicago. If you're looking to make a move here, please connect with our team. Information's in the description below. All right, so one of the most common concerns I get from buyers is, how do I ensure I'm not overpaying once we get into a bidding war? So I want to talk through that in our process and what we do for our buyers in today's video. So let's jump right into that. So the first and most important thing that a buyer needs to understand is, what are your numbers? What do you believe a home is worth in the current environment? Let's not think about yet what's going on with other buyers, but let's understand and be very well grounded in what we believe we would be willing to pay for a given property. Now, in order to do that, you need an agent who's going to break down the specifics of the comparable sales and the market to you so you can make an informed decision. Let's start first with the latter. Let's talk about the market. Why is that important? Well, you need to know, is the market moving up or down, or is it fairly stable? Because if it's moving up, you would expect the comps to rise above, or I'm sorry, you should expect the subject property to rise above the recent comps. In our market here in the western suburbs of Chicago, we're appreciating at about 8% a year right now. And so if you're looking at a comp from 3 months ago, you need to make an adjustment on what that would do in today's market. And oh, by the way, you probably need to make another adjustment for where that is going to be going in the future, because that home's not going to close for 30, 45 days. And if the market's moving up, you need to account for that. So you might be making a 3% adjustment to that comp to understand what that's going to do in the future. So that's very important. Now, on the flip side, if you're in an area like Florida, different areas where you have lots of inventory, that market's moving down. So if that comp sold for 1.2 million 3 months ago, that may sell for 1.1 million in today's environment. So that's very, very important. You need to understand that. You need to also understand what homes of similar homes are on the market currently that could be dividing attention of buyers. So if this is the only house in this price range in this given elementary school district, it's a very hot neighborhood, you can expect a lot more competition for buyers than if you had 5 homes of the same type on the market at the same time. That's also very important. So what else are you competing with? Do you expect a lot of activity from buyers or not? Now, the next part of that is just understanding the comparables. So let's look at comparable sales. Again, let's make adjustments for size, finishes, and features. That's very, very important. It's easier to comp maybe a townhome or an area that has been built up and all the homes are from the same builder and from the same time frame. However, if you're looking in an area like, let's just, for example, look at the western suburbs of Chicago, you're looking in Glen Ellyn or Elmhurst, you have homes that were built over the last 115 years. You have some old farmhouses, some Victorian, you have some traditional, modern, you have some craftsman style, you've seen rebuilds over the course of time. So it's much more extensive process to be comping a property in those neighborhoods than it would be if you were in a Pulte community where everything was built by Pulte and every house looks the same. So you need to understand that. And once you do, you need to feel very confident about your numbers. So you need to understand, what would my monthly payment be based on the interest rate, based on what I believe this home is worth, and am I comfortable with that? That is the most important thing. Now, let's say you've done all that work and this house is listed for $700,000, and in your head you're like, man, I would be willing to pay $725 based on the market, based on the comps, based on my conversation with the lender about what the payment would be. I would be willing to pay that. And then, so do I pay that? Now, this is where you need your agent to come in, because the whole point of the video is, okay, we're in a bidding war. So the agent calls the listing agent and they say, hey, look, we are in a multiple offer situation and we need to put your highest and best in by tomorrow at noon. Now, a good agent, at least in our marketplace, is very common to ask and to understand whether you can submit an offer with an escalation clause. Now, that's a very important tactic, because an escalation clause allows you to submit an offer in relation to the next highest offer. So you might be saying, I'm willing to pay $725. The magic of the escalation rider is, instead of just leading with $725, the escalation rider allows you to basically set a floor, a ceiling, and then an amount that you're willing to rise above the next offer. So the way that would play out potentially is, using an escalation rider, you could say, hey, we're gonna offer $700,000, but then we're willing to beat the next highest offer by $5,000 up to $725. So your floor is 700, your ceiling 725, and you're going to beat the next highest offer by 5 grand. You might be asking, well, why not beat it by $100? Why go 5 grand over? Well, let's just assume in this case that our buyer is financing the home, they're 10% down. We've seen many scenarios where you're competing against a cash buyer, and that cash buyer is going to pay $5,000 less but still beat you because there's other terms that matter to the seller other than price. So in this case, let's say, hey, we want to make sure we're covering cash buyers and we want to provide additional value in case we're not the best and some of these other terms to offset that to still win this deal. So let's say the next highest offer was $690. Well, you'd be paying $700 because that's your floor. But let's say that next highest offer was $717. You would be paying $717 plus your $5,000 escalation. So you'd be at $722. So you'd have saved a few $1,000s using that escalation rider. Now, if the next highest offer rises above your cap of $725, you probably lost the deal, or at least you're not the highest offer from a price perspective. So it's a very important tactic. Now, the next thing I would want to know, if the agent's willing to share it, is have your buyer's agent reach out to see, how many offers do you have. Now, the listing agent doesn't necessarily have to share that, but you're trying to get as much information as possible. You don't need to be necessarily as aggressive potentially if there were 2 offers versus 12 offers. So you could structure your offer accordingly depending on how much activity there is. But the most important thing, and the number one way to not overpay during a bidding war, is to understand your numbers. You need to not get psyched out about what other people might do. Somebody might really overpay and somebody maybe doesn't. And if you use that escalation rider, it's a very safe way to understand that you're rising just above the market. You're rising just above what the rest of the market's willing to pay to get the job done and to get that home. Now, the other thing I would say, if you have any sort of flexibility seasonally, there's going to be, at least here in Chicagoland, there's a much different feel in March, April, and even part of May than there is June, July, and August. The beginning of spring is the craziest time. It's the most competitive time. It's when buyers are most aggressive. Don't ask me why. It's just how it is every single year. I think if I had to put a theory behind it, it's all the buyers that didn't get something done in the fall that really wanted to, that are eager to now get something done. And it's all the planners, all the people that had the holidays to think about it. And they're like, man, we're going to get something done this year. And the springtime, the thaw happens. They want to get back out of hibernation and they are ready to go and they're super aggressive. We've seen this the last 2 years here in Chicagoland where we have buyers writing some really strong offers in like March and they might not get the home because there's that one crazy person out there willing to do more. And that person, eventually you go through, March and April and part of May, a lot of those crazy buyers are now off the table. They found their home, they're out of the market. And then it kind of frees up some opportunities to the people that were writing really good offers that maybe were being beaten out. There provides an opportunity for those people to get into their home. We saw that last year. We're already starting to see that this year. We're now, as I'm taping this video, getting into May, it is calming just a little bit, and you're gonna see some of these people get across the finish line. So if you're worried about overpaying, you need to educate yourself on the comps. You need to not worry about what other people are doing. You need to understand your numbers, what you're comfortable with. Then you need your agent to get in there and to find out as much information as possible about the activity, number of offers, anything they can find out. And then third, you wanna look at some of the ways that you can structure your offer to ensure you're rising just above the rest of the market. That is your way to understand and to make sure you're not overpaying. Now, I would also say, depending on which way pricing is going in your market, there's more or less risk to this. So I would say in Florida right now, because we're looking at some property there, they're at 15 months of inventory, and that means pricing is going down, and there's no telling where the bottom is necessarily. And so that's a little bit more risky place to get in and a riskier place to overpay versus a place like here in Chicagoland, where we have so much pressure on inventory that even though it's going to feel expensive on day one when you buy that house because the market's moving up, you're going to be in a really good position a year later because that market's moving up about 8% a year. So it's going to be, in a way, much more difficult to overpay in the Chicagoland market than it is the Florida market, for example, because one has pricing moving up, one has pricing moving down. In the Florida market, we're not sure where the bottom is necessarily. And here in Chicago, we know because supply is so limited, it would take a little while to have that ship turn. And there's no real great, anything in the data to suggest the market's going to turn. Even when interest rates doubled overnight, inventory stayed really low because it created that lock-in effect. And so we're in this perpetual low inventory environment. Reading an article from Realtor.com saying that our market, it would take about 47 years to close the inventory gap or the supply gap and what people want to buy and what people that want to trade versus where the supply is. And that's just looking at household formations, looking at population versus the amount that builders are building in the area. And it's just, there's no end in sight really for this market here. And when you look at the West and the Southwest and the Southeast, it's very different. They're closing that supply gap really quickly because they're building tons of homes. They have tons of vacation homes on second homes that are being released into the market. And so the dynamics there are very, very different. So you want to look at the local environment, the local market to understand how to protect yourself as well. I hope that's helpful for you. If you're looking for more information about our market here in Chicagoland, again, don't hesitate to reach out, like, subscribe if you want to stay updated on things to do in the western suburbs of Chicago, tips about different areas, neighborhoods, schools, all that good stuff, and then just some overall strategy around real estate. Talk next time.